Recording, Chair.
Great, diolch yn fawr. Bore da chi, a croeso. Welcome to this morning's meeting of the South West Wales CJC's Regional Transport Subcommittee. First of all, can I just make an announcement that clearly the meeting is being recorded, as you've just heard. So could I ask members to make sure that their microphones are switched to mute unless you're speaking, and to make sure that mobile phones are switched off, and obviously to raise your electronic hand if you wish to ask a question. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interests, buddiannau personol. Os unrhyw ddatganiad da unrhyw aelod, are there any declarations of interest from members? I can't see any, so we'll move on to item 3 then, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. So these start on page 3 of the agenda that we have today, and they are a reflection of the meeting of the 8th of January and here for approval. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes from members? I don't see any. No. So could I ask then for a proposer and a seconder to approve those minutes? Andrew proposing.
Happy to propose, Chair.
Oh, and Edward happy to second then. So we've got proposer and seconder. So could I ask members to show by raising your hands and if you're happy to accept formally? All in favour? Great, diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. So we move on then to item 4, which is the substantive item this morning, of course, with regards to the South West Wales Regional Transport Plan. The agenda item starts on page 11 and runs through to page 1142. Can't believe I'm saying that number, but there we are. Yeah, that goes to show the amount of work that's gone on in the background here, isn't it, over the past few months to get to this point. So the report is here for decision. I will mention at this stage that appendices 10 and 11 in this report are exempt under paragraph 14. So we will need to go into private session if a member officer does want to discuss any element of those appendices in detail. And I would just ask members to bring that to my attention so that we can make the necessary arrangements. But for now, what I'll do is I'll ask, Rhys, do you want to come in?
Yeah, diolch, David. I'm just wondering whether or not we briefly need to go into private session to maintain the confidentiality of those two documents outside of this meeting. That's the sort of process that we have used in Pembrokeshire. If there is information contained within those documents, even if we go into private session for 10 seconds, it maintains the confidentiality of those two documents. And I'm just wondering whether without that, these would have to be published as part of the papers for this meeting. If there's nothing in there that's contentious, that's fine. But I'm just wondering, just seeking some advice from yourself or our officers on whether we would need to do that just to maintain that confidentiality around the document following this meeting concluding.
Okay, I don't know whether or not I could help you there. The documents have been published privately, so both documents are exempt. And if members don't have any questions relating to those documents, there would be no need to go into private. It would only be if you have questions relating to those documents that you'd have to go into private session. I hope, Chair, that helps to clarify things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Rhys, you're quite right. We've got the flexibility. If we need to go into private session for a period as short as it may be, that is absolutely within our gift here. So we can see where it goes. It may be that questions will arise with regards to those specific appendices as we have the discussion. It may not, but for now, I'm quite content then to move forward. In general terms, I'll ask Mark and Stuart just to introduce the report and provide that context for us in terms of how we've got to where we are today. Mark, are you going to say a few words first, or is it straight through to Stuart?
Straight through to Stuart, please, Chair. Thank you.
Great, no problems. Thank you. Diolch, Stuart.
Okay, diolch, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll just sort of cover some of the introductory items. What I'll then do, I'll hand over to Lee to run through the RTP in terms of what's happened, I suppose, since you last saw it in draft form, and the changes and things, and give an overview of the RTP itself. And then I'll drop back to myself just to go over the key points in terms of the regional transport delivery plan that's appended on there. So, so the purpose in terms of the report is to note the progress on the regional transport plan itself, to endorse the final regional transport plan and the supporting documents to go onwards to the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee, and to also note the latest position in terms of the grant funding and some of the updates in terms of the grants modernisation work which is underway, which we've been asked to provide comments and feedback to Welsh Government on. And then finally, the fourth recommendation is to note the requirements for additional resources in terms of on there. We've had an allocation for the Welsh Government to continue to support the work for this year and hopefully then on into future years on there. So what I'll do, I'll hand over to Lee, if that's okay, just to cover, as I say, the regional transport plan element, the policy sections and things on there. So Lee, if you're okay to give an overview.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. I think obviously this is an evolving document. As you will be aware, you were involved in the decision-making process back in February to launch the public consultation. So there has been some evolution since then, as you would expect. Stuart will obviously run through the delivery plan items, and obviously that is where I think, Chair, there may be some discussion about items appendices 10 and 11, the private papers that you may need to move into closed session to discuss. Just in terms of the report then, Chair, I think the recommendations, as Stuart has said, are self-explanatory. I think the key steps from here on in, just to outline the timescales, we're at Scrutiny Committee next week, the main CJC on the 10th of July. The aim is to submit subject to the main CJC approval on the 24th of July, and we've been promised a response by Welsh ministers by October. So and then that sets the start of the RTP period will be the 1st of April next year. So hopefully in October there'll be both an announcement about the suitability of the RTP from Welsh Government terms, but also an indication of the funding that we're going to get for that 1st of April period from next year onwards. Key things that have gone on since we met last: a public consultation has been conducted. We got about 900 responses to that. So once again, an excellent response rate for this type of policy-led consultation. Obviously, within that, I think very similar themes emerged to what we saw last time. So lots of discussion by respondents in terms of coverage of the bus network. Obviously, lots of commentary about suitability of active travel in and where that may be best located. And obviously, I think, there was quite a bit of, shall we say, lobbying by members of the public for a scheme near them, both for and against a particular scheme, which I think you would expect. So the consultation brought no surprises. Unlike one of the other regions that had a pressure group that was formed to oppose a particular large scheme, and that resulted in a massive number of probably around 600-700 responses, just about one scheme. We've not had that, so we see that the consultation produced a balanced flavour of what people's views were. As part of that consultation exercise, we went on the rounds again with the various stakeholder groups that we'd established. And I think the messaging from those groups is very much similar to what we saw before, in terms of, I think, obviously, public transport, clear issues about bus and rail, as you would expect, and how that's delivered. Obviously, some of that's not within our gift, particularly the rail schemes and bus franchising. But also, I think there was lots of sensible suggestions, like a stronger link, for instance, to the energy policy that the CJC is looking at. So those stakeholder groups provided a really useful context to us as well. Just in terms of the actual process, the draft RTP that's in front of you today does include all the statutory assessments that we've been obliged to undertake. So there's an integrated wellbeing assessment that also covers strategic environmental impact assessment, and there's a habitats regulation assessment. Once again, legal advice from the monitoring officer. Given the breadth and the impact of the RTP, very little choice but to conduct those detailed assessments, and they're in the pack of information that's actually part of the RTP as well. So the main outcome from those statutory assessments at this stage, we see no impediment in those statutory assessment terms to the RTP proceeding forward into its actual into the actual phase of moving forward, delivering schemes and applying the policies. So clean bill of health there from the statutory assessments. Funding and resources, Stuart's briefly touched on that. There is some discussion in the paper about the resources required to deliver the plan and to move the plan forward. That, I think, may, Stuart, fall back into Stuart's discussion about the delivery plan, Chair. Clearly, you know, those items are intrinsically linked together. The delivery of the plan, Stuart will talk about that in more detail. I think it's fair to say the impacts that we've gone through in terms of the requirements in the report, we don't see any fundamental blocks to the RTP being adopted, being delivered, and so on. And obviously colleagues around the region have been through the legal, the workforce impacts and so on, and we don't see any impediment there to delivery. Just to highlight some of the changes that have been made then, Chair, and this is probably where I then finish up and pass back to Stuart to look at the delivery plan, if I may. First, the changes in format. You will see that the national schemes that we're relying on, so those schemes that are in the Welsh Government's national delivery plan, plus the ones that we aspire to be delivered by the Welsh Government in a revised national delivery plan from 2027 onwards, they've been moved from our delivery plan into the main text of the RTP document. Obviously, we've got no locus to deliver those schemes, but actually they are essential to what we're doing. They're effectively the framework and the spine of our transport network. So we've been advised in discussion with the Welsh Government to actually highlight those schemes actually in the main document of the RTP text itself. So those have moved. We've obviously updated the text, as you would appreciate, in a number of areas, but I would just highlight two, if I may, Chair. Obviously, the bus franchising matters have moved on, and the current RTP reflects the position as of probably about 5 to 6 weeks ago. Now we know there's further steps going to be taken on bus franchising by TfW and Welsh Government in the next few weeks and months, but obviously it's a snapshot in time as to where we are. The other item that you will see that has changed in the text relatively substantially, we beefed up and made far more of the metro than we did previously. I think there was general consensus both amongst members and indeed officers that we'd probably not put enough emphasis on the metro, and particularly the regional elements of the metro. So that has now been brought out into more focus in the main RTP document itself. Just in terms of the policies then, just to wrap up before Stuart comes back on the delivery plan side of things. In terms of the policies, very little change, I think it's fair to say, Chair. The structure of the document has been updated to reflect some of the comments, particularly from Welsh Government, to ensure that the policies link firstly back to the evidence base, but also secondly link forward into the delivery plan. So it was more about emphasising those links, Chair. We had a set of policies that were very much right for the region, but the flow of the RTP document was not there. So the policies are pretty much as what they were before. Very little change in those. They do reflect the 3 priorities in the Welsh Transport Strategy and then our 6 objectives below that, and they're structured in that vein as you've seen previously. So no real update to the actual wording of the policies, but far better linkage to the environment in which those policies operate. So I think that's about everything, Chair, just in terms of the mechanics of this. I think just to emphasise, Chair, Stuart's and your comment earlier, it has been a team effort, and I think, I couldn't have done what I've done without Stuart and Mark and colleagues around the region putting significant effort in. So I think it is a team sport, this, and I just want to take the opportunity, Chair, to thank yourself for helping us along the way, as it were. I think that's everything in terms of the RTP. Obviously, we can take questions, and obviously Stuart will run through the delivery plan first, I think.
Thanks, Lee. Yep, Joe Stewart.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Lee. In terms of the delivery plan, obviously we've the documents appended into there as part of the pack. Just, I guess, as a refresh really of how we got to where we did on the delivery plan. We started off with a very long list of schemes of everything included in there. Initial sort of screening process to take out the schemes which were either repetition or clearly kind of inappropriate in terms of for delivery, or fell completely outside the transport policy framework. We also went through the consultation period of seeking views, so that helped further sort of shape the plan. We also developed a kind of quite a robust sort of matrix scoring approach in terms of as part of the prioritisation work. So that was looking at a number of different transport metrics and how the schemes scored in terms of their alignment with policy and the benefit and things they brought. So that took us into, I guess, the first stage of the kind of shortlisted schemes. We then undertook a sort of a further kind of prioritisation process to look at the kind of key priorities for delivery within the authorities across the region, and I guess in terms of what was considered important from a political and community sort of perspective as well, to help inform the key schemes from each of the four authorities. And the next stage we came to, and this was sort of, as I say, an iterative kind of process really. Was we then developed a list of schemes that fell into the kind of delivery kind of package of schemes, the ones that we saw as being top of the list for, at the moment anyway, for things which should be brought forward and be submitted for funding and be taken forward. And then a development list of schemes. So those are ones which still need more work and are possibly the less of a priority at the moment. But very much we see this as a live sort of document, so as a live list with the ability to switch from one to the other depending on what transport priorities come through, whether some may be linked to developments or major regeneration projects. So some of the schemes that are in the delivery list could end up sort of sliding back into the development list if things changes, and equally the development list ones could be brought forward and fed up as the regional transport plan is embedded over the years and the delivery plan is sort of rolled out. Some of the key things we've obviously been discussing things with Welsh Government is on this. We've got the total list of things in terms of the regional transport delivery plan just above sort of 500 million, that sort of region. Obviously, a lot of these are kind of scoped initial figures and would require more work. The kind of Welsh Government obviously don't know their budgets at the moment. They can't predict into the future, but the sort of indicative figures that they've given us to work towards might be somewhere a bit less than 200 million. So obviously there's potentially a fair bit more work to do of refining those projects into, once funding comes confirmed, what we end up delivering in terms of on there. But certainly if the funding levels are in line with the outline indications from Welsh Government, then not everything will be delivered, and that's strong and clear, and we will have to continue the prioritisation. So I guess it's that sort of management of expectation element really that I think it's right that we've got something which states our level of ambition and what we feel that we want to deliver from across the region, and we have got a lot of needs, and we want to, make sure that the voice of South West Wales is heard in terms of that we need and we want that transport investment. But the likelihood is that there will be some further prioritisation work, which will certainly have to happen in terms of towards developing next year's programme and on an ongoing basis. Another element really is the major schemes. We've got sort of 4 major schemes which potentially are over £100 million. And we need the discussions with Welsh Government to see how those major schemes are going to be dealt with, and that major schemes, I guess, across Wales have an equitable process really for considering how those are dealt with, because obviously if we've got major schemes of that nature, then they've got an extremely high ask on what could be a sort of a reduced budget. So we need to sort of, I think, work along with Welsh Government and have those discussions as to how they're dealt with. So the next stage is that working up the plan from where we've got to. Obviously, some of the documents in terms of 10, 11 have got some detail in there. But we will need to do some more prioritisation ahead. I think once we've got the outcome of what the grants modernisation process is, what it looks like, what the levels of funding and how that funding is allocated, then there'll be a lot of discussions to be had in terms of as a CJC, and then that information will need to come across to yourselves in terms of before we cast in stone the programme for 26-27 delivery. So I think that's the main parts of the delivery plan, Chair. So just to cover on that. One thing I would say, there may obviously we were under some pressured timescales to deliver the final RTP and RTDP. There may be some minor typographical and changes and things in advance of submitting the final paper in terms of across to the regional to the CJC itself. But certainly, as there'd be nothing fundamental, but it was almost just to make you aware of that, Chair, that there could be some changes just in terms of minor corrections and things on there. And I think that's the main points really. Obviously, there are other colleagues, Mark, and there are other colleagues from across the other authorities as well, if they want to say anything. But I think that's covered the main things I was wanting to cover. So thank you, Chair.
Great, Stuart, thank you very much. Are there any other comments from officers first, in addition to what Stuart has presented, or are we quite content with what's been said? Yeah, I think people are quite content, so there's no need for any additional comments from officers' perspective. Yeah, so thank you, Stuart and Lee, for that presentation and providing the context. As we're fully aware of the time pressures that have been put on us as a region to try and get to this point today. So we're grateful for all the work that's gone on in the background. But I think, Stuart, you touched on it's about managing expectations. I think there's a real task for us here, isn't there? Because I think when you look at the RTP and the sums of funding that we would love to have over the next 5 years, well, clearly they far exceed what we've been provided in terms of indicative figures from Welsh Government, because clearly they don't know what they have got coming on the road either at this stage. So I think when you look at that context, yeah, there's a significant gap there, isn't it, in terms of that. Was it 512 million that we would love to do over the next 5 years, compared to what, up to possibly 200 if we're lucky. So there's a significant gap there. And I know that discussions are happening on all sorts of levels in terms of trying to address the funding gap more generally in terms of transport in Wales, and also within the region here. So I'm sure that's something we can come on to later on. On that very small typographical thing, Stuart, I've picked up one on our end here this morning. So there's reference to on page 1105 there, when we talk about the Neath Active Travel Scheme. At the bottom of the page, we talk about Binie and Llangefni. So there's a bit of a typo there. I was up in Llangefni actually this weekend, and
that'd be quite a scheme, really.
That would be quite a scheme, yes. That would be.
I was going to say.
we'd be competing with HS2 for funding on that one, but no. So what that should reflect is Llangennech and Llwynhendy, but so we can sort that out in the background. But I will open up at this point then to members for their thoughts and comments at this stage. Are there any contributions? Andrew.
Yeah, no, Chair, thanks. I just want to echo some of your comments, really, in particular around the timescales and the significant work that's gone into this. And I did just want to put a record on my thanks on my team in Swansea, as well as all the teams across the local authorities here, and all the work that's gone on behind the scenes for the phenomenal, let's face it, amount of work that's gone into this against some very tight timescales that have been dealt down to us by Welsh Government. So yeah, I just wanted to put that on record, Chair. That's all. Thanks. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So as I say, so essentially we need to submit this by the end of July. It'll go to the full CJC following scrutiny committee over the next few weeks. And then, as Lee mentioned, we expect to hear in October time whether the RTP has been approved, and of course then the indicative funding available for the next financial year, so 26-27. But I think the important thing from my point of view is that, as Stuart mentioned, this is a live list, so we've split them into the delivery and development pathways, but there is opportunity there, particularly given the fact that we will have to review this on an annual basis anyway, for us to take a stock check at those points, and there may be scope to move projects to different years depending on where we are in the development. But I think there is a fundamental issue here. I know I spoke to a number of leaders last week in the WGA conference in Llandudno, including the chair of the CJC, Rob Stewart in Swansea. So clearly there's a focus here in terms of the highways and active travel schemes across the region. But of course, as Stuart and Lee mentioned, there's a lot of linkage here then in terms of the rail infrastructure, which obviously is not something that we will fund through the RTP, but which is fundamental to us as part of any metro discussion in the southwest. Bus franchising is another element that still hasn't been pinned down at this point. So there's a lot of work for us to do in terms of thinking around that. And of course, as we mentioned, these major schemes. So we've got 4 in this region, but there will be others across Wales, and there is still uncertainty in terms of how national funding is allocated to fund schemes of national importance. What is the process that sits behind that? How do we ensure equity across Wales? And I think for us there is a fundamental question there, because when you look at the comprehensive spending review announcement a few weeks ago, in terms of rail, we've lost out massively compared to other regions. So I think there's a big piece of work for us to do, just to ensure that our ambitions are understood at both Welsh Government and UK Government level, and that we get our fair share of funding. I know that, as I suggested, I'd spoken to a couple of leaders in the WGA conference last week, and I think it's fair to say that there's frustration in the system. So that should be a task for us going over the next few months now, just to ensure that we are absolutely clear in those discussions with governments at different levels as of what our ambitions are for the region. As Stuart mentioned, there's still uncertainty around the grant modernisation as well, so there are ongoing discussions with Welsh Government around that. But hopefully over the next few months we'll get that clarity in terms of processes and funding levels over the next few years, which will help us then in terms of our prioritisation as a region going forward. But yeah, I would like just to echo really the sentiments that Andrew mentioned there. There's been a huge amount of work going on in the background here, Lee and officers from across the 4 councils, and yeah, I just like to put on record really our thanks as members for the huge amount of work that's gone on in that regard. It's not a small task, as is reflected in the size of the paper that's in front of us this morning. So if Rhys.
Joe Cadero, yeah, I think I'd very much echo everything you've said so far, and also Andrew's, thanks to everyone who's put such a huge amount of time and effort into what is, it's an impressive document that hangs together really well, and is, 1,000 pages is not to be sniffed at, definitely. But I think the key thing is the key word that I think you may have used is flexibility. Really, we've got to be able to respond to changing conditions, at UK and Senate level around funding, which is why I think the development monies that are noted as part of this this long list are really important that we commit to, so that we have schemes that are ready to go and that are on the shelf, and subject to some last minute some change being found down the back of the sofa, possibly, then at certain points during the year, then we're able to move on that. So I think the importance of the development money is, I'd like to stress that, really, and I think we if we haven't already committed to that as part of the comments back to the CJC as a whole, then I'd very much like to see us do that. Thanks, Gadeer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Point well made, Rhys. I think that's absolutely fundamental. So I concur fully with that. Are there any further comments or questions at this stage? No. So it looks as if people are quite content then. So if that is the case, then there are 4 recommendations before us this morning on page 11. 1, 3 and 4 for noting under recommendation 2, of course, is to endorse the final RTP and supporting documents to the South West Wales CJC in a few weeks' time. If members are happy with that, could I ask for a proposer? Edward is happy to propose. Thank you very much. And could I ask for a seconder? Andrew, thank you very much, Andrew. So, and again, then, if I could ask all members to raise their hands to formally accept then the recommendations in front of us. There we are. Diolch yn fawr. So everyone's in agreement. That's unanimous. I think just to pick up on that as well, even though it's not a formal recommendation, I think that I would be keen to make representations at that CJC joint committee meeting in terms of this issue of equity of funding. I know I've spoken informally with a number of people and they feel there's a piece of work for us to do there, both in terms of the RTP and the allocation of these national road schemes, and the funding that's allocated on that basis, but also in terms of the wider transport spend, as I suggested, in terms of rail infrastructure as well, because there's a risk here that we will miss out. So I think it's important that we speak as a sort of united voice. I mean, are members happy that I make those representations on behalf of the subcommittee at that CJC meeting? If that is the case, I will do that.
Yeah, totally agree, Chair.
Thank you. There we are. And it may be that we can formalise that in one way, shape, or form via the 4 leaders in terms of correspondence with Welsh Government or UK Government in due course. So there we are. Okay, great. So thank you very much for that. Then I'll act on that as well. So we can move on to item 5 then, which is the forward work programme for the subcommittee. Starts on page 1143 on the pack. Clearly, we've got a session at 11 AM to go through this in detail. So for now, it will just be for noting if members are happy to do that. Members happy to note it as it is, and we can refine that then following the workshop this morning. So we can move on to item 6, which is urgent items. None have been brought to my attention. And so on that basis, to my understanding, there are no other items to discuss. So thank you all for your attendance this morning and your contributions. And I declare the meeting closed. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
Chair, if I could just add, if members could rejoin the forward plan work programme meeting now at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, on that one, I mean, what are people's thoughts? Do we want to have a break for quarter of an hour and come back at 11, or do we want to go straight through? What are people's preferences?
Straight through for me.
Yeah, I'm happy to go through. Is anybody else any?
There's no public access. We can carry on straight away if everybody's available.
I think we'd have, sorry, Chair, if we can just close this meeting and rejoin the other one that Chloe has circulated. So there's a nice clean end for the recording.
Oh,
okay.
Right. Oh, sorry,
Okay.
I thought the recording had finished. Sorry. Apologies. There we are. We'll okay then. So we'll log out of this one and log into